Sorry for the brief interruption here at the front of the video. I'm actually editing this episode right now, and I noticed a few particular bumps that I wanted to call out before the show started. Thank you for clicking. You're going to enjoy the show with Dan. These call outs are 40 minutes in, Dan's close-up camera stopped working. 15 minutes before the end of the show, the wide angle stopped working. So the show closes out with about a 15-minute single visual conversation with myself. Happily, all the audio is fantastic. All the content is fantastic. Dan is amazing and incredibly talented. One of the things that happens with this show that I'm keenly aware of is the fact that I'm probably overreaching on the amount of work and sort of need to be attentive in the moment for a single individual on a podcast like this with a 3-camera setup. Unfortunately, that got the best of me this time around, but the show's still really fantastic, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Thank you for being here, and enjoy. All right, guys, we're back. It is episode 007 for the Listening Game podcast. My name is Kevin. Of course, if you're new here, thank you for joining us. There's a video up on our YouTube channel that'll give you a quick overview of what Harken Interactive is and what we're trying to accomplish with this show. And I'm really excited because today's show is the first opportunity I've had to talk with someone that I've never worked with before. This is actually going to be very exciting for me because I think I've learned a lot, even setting up this podcast, about just how small the industry is, but we're going to dig into that a little bit. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Dan Glasl. This is the lead concept artist for inXile.
Senior concept artist.
Senior concept artist for inXile.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, it is a pleasure to meet you, and of course, to have you here in my house.
Yeah, thanks for having me in, man.
Yeah, sorry it's so crowded with equipment. It's usually a little more hospitable than this. But man, maybe we should, for the folks who are watching, talk a little bit about even how we got connected.
Sure, yeah.
I know a gentleman that I worked with at Blizzard on Heroes of the Storm by the name of Thomas Horwath connected me with you. He said, hey, there's this really talented guy. He's really great, and I think he'd be good for your show. But how do you know Thomas? I'm curious.
Yeah, so Tom and I worked together at Fireforge Games, which was my first job in the industry. So,
awesome.
He was the first VFX artist I ever met. So, we used to play things like Star Wars during lunch and that kind of stuff. And then, we when that company went under, then we all went our separate ways, but we stayed together. We still talk and that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome.
He helped me get tickets to BlizzCon this year.
Oh, that's dope. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, man, that Blizzard connection is good for BlizzCon.
Oh, it's wonderful.
That's for sure. And beta tests.
Yes.
So hold on to those things.
And those wonderful the loot crates. The Blizzard bucks.
For sure, the Blizz bucks flow freely out of Blizzard employees occasionally. Top secret tip for those of you who know Blizzard employees on Twitter. Maybe hit them up, ask them a little bit. I'm gonna get in trouble for that. Okay, dude, that's awesome. Well, I have a ton of questions about Fireforge, and we're gonna get to that at some point because I think our lives and our paths kind of intertwine there in an odd way due to my history at 38 Studios. Mm-hmm. But before we get into all of that, I just want to hear a little bit more about your origin story. I'm fascinated on the outside just looking at it because I know you spent time in the military.
Yes.
And you also grew up in a state that I'm hyper fond of because I went to college in Colorado.
Oh, which college?
The Colorado College.
Oh, yes, Colorado Springs.
Yeah, dude. So I spent a good chunk of my life in Colorado, and my wife's family's from Colorado. We met at school at the Colorado College. So, so Colorado is near and dear to my heart. But what part of the state were you?
So I used to live in Divide, Colorado. So you lived in Colorado. You know where Divide is, yes.
Dude.
Wow,
that's way...
So there's Colorado Springs, then you go over the mountains and you find Woodland Park. Then you go another 15 miles and you find Divide, which is...
Yeah, dude.
They used to sell bumper stickers at the gas station that said, Divide, the center of the known universe. Which is about the only claim that town had. But yeah, that's something. It was literally in the middle of nowhere. So I grew up in the middle of absolutely nowhere,
dude. That part of the state is it's special though.
It is.
It is. Colorado College had a campus in Crestone, which is right in the San Luis Valley. Or is that what that big valley is? Once you get over the main Front Range, I'm probably totally failing my geography. But it's near the sand dunes.
Yeah.
It's just north of the sand dunes there, on the backside of the Sangre de Cristo mountain range. And man, what a special part of the state.
Oh, yeah.
It is definitely less trafficked.
Oh yeah, no.
But that makes it pretty magical.
Yeah, I mean, you grow up in the country and that kind of stuff, so you play outside all the time, and so small town boy, then I got out when I finished high school and that kind of stuff. And I said to myself, I gotta get out of this small town. I throw down my cheese shovel and I leave small town America and I joined the Navy.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I don't want to skip over that. Like, why that jump seems pretty big.
Well, so my brother was already serving.
Okay.
He actually just retired last year. He did the full 20.
Awesome.
My grandfather served during World War II. So
So
there's just, Colorado Springs, it's a huge military town.
Yeah, there's an Air Force base there.
Yeah, there's Air Force Base, NORAD, Space Command, the Air Force Academy, Fort Carson. It's just, it is a military, and then you have all the defense contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all the, it's all up there. And so, it is just part of the culture in that area. So the idea is like, I was getting ready to graduate from high school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. You grow up in that part of the country, like the idea of the arts is just not something that ever crosses your mind. It's like, that's not a viable career path, The idea is like, no, you go and you do like engineering or you do architecture, real jobs that real people do to make money.
Yeah.
So, I said to myself, like, I don't know if I want to do college right away. My brother's in. I can join the military. I can get experience. I can, get some money for college. Let's do that. Let's do that for a number of years. Let's find that, let's grow up a little bit.
Sure.
So I joined I graduated in 2000.
Okay.
June.
Yeah.
I go to boot camp. And then,
what was that like? I'm sure you try to prepare as much as you can.
You know what? I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I was, you've seen Full Metal Jacket, right?
Totally, yeah.
It's nothing like that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, it kind of disappointed me.
You're like, wait, wow,
you're expecting a certain thing of like, it's when they start yelling at you, it's gonna be so real, man. But it's like, they yell at you, but it's like most of the time you're just sitting there like shining your boots and ironing your clothes and just trying to fill time. Because it's like there's a lot of time where it's just like you're waiting to do something else because there's certain things they have you scheduled to do while you're in there. So it's like, if you're not, if someone didn't mess up and everybody's doing push-ups or something like that, but you're just kind of sitting around shining your boots.
Yeah, interesting.
Learning how to make your bed really well.
Totally.
So, I went to Great Lakes, Chicago for boot camp, otherwise known colloquially to the Navy as Great Mistakes.
Oh, man. I love it.
But, middle of summer in Illinois, sweltering heat, right next to the lake. So you get that wonderful humidity in the summer. Then the winter comes and you get that great lake effect snow and that wind whipping off of Lake Michigan. And it gets so cold. So when I was after I got done with boot camp, I was going to my A school because I was learning how to be a radar technician. So I wanted to learn electronics. So I could do a real job, real job as an engineer.
Dude, I totally understand.
I was learning a lot.
My origin story has some of that as well, like that real job thing.
Yeah.
I wonder where that comes from, by the way. Sorry to interrupt your story, but I think it's kind of fascinating. It's this sense of like doing life right or something.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from where you grow up. Like if I had grown up in Orange County, like, there's a lot of people in the games industry who grew up here.
Yeah.
And so the idea of I'm going to work for Blizzard or I'm going to work for, inXile or a game studio. Games is not a esoteric like career path.
Right.
Like it is a part of Southern California. It is a viable career path. But if you grow up in some place like, middle of country Kansas or, Georgia, or it's like, it's not even, those kind of career paths don't even really seem real. I mean, the idea of getting into games as a career didn't even cross my mind until I was almost into my master's degree in college.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Because it just, it doesn't, if it's not part of your life,
right?
If you're not exposed to it, a lot of people, it just doesn't even register as like, this is something I can do.
Were games a part of your life pre-military? I mean,
I was always playing video games as a kid. I had the the old Atari with that awful ET. I actually owned that ET game that everybody hates.
Yeah,
it's like,
the one that they got buried.
Yeah, that they buried in the desert. But it's like I saw the document. Like I was sitting with my wife, like I've actually played that game. Yeah. I know that. And the frustration of a 3-year-old trying to play ET and just amazingly, it didn't stop me from wanting to play video games.
Those games are freaking hard, dude. Yeah. Like I went back to play the SNES Star Wars game. They re-released it on PlayStation or something. I think I bought it.
Yeah.
And I remember putting a ton of, like renting the game from Blockbuster and putting a ton of time in on the weekend on that game. But I tried to play it as an adult. Dude, that game is impossible as a platformer. It's like, what?
It's the old Ninja Turtles for NES. Like, that game was so hard.
So hard. We've gotten crazy soft as gamers.
Yes, we have. Like, those old hardcore platformers that were made, like, is that thing. It's like back in the day, they made arcade games intentionally difficult, so you'd have to keep pumping quarters into them. But it's like
that was the free to play of old.
It's like
pay to play of old.
Yeah, so it's like you had these games that when they came to console, they just ported it directly over. It's like this game is impossible.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, man. I couldn't believe it. That was a real shock for me. Anyways, I totally interrupted and hijacked your story.
No, it's okay.
We were talking about radar technician.
Yes. Yeah. So. But the story that I was saying is, so North Chicago, middle of winter, they make you get up in 5 a.m. to go stand out in line before you march over your school. And it was so cold that your nose starts to run a little bit when it's cold. You breathe in through your nose and it'd go beep and freeze shut. It's like, okay, that's cold. I don't smoke, but I'm gonna go stand over by the smokers because at least they have fire.
At least there's some fire there.
There's some warmth that can be shared.
Gosh, man. That's intense.
Yeah, so I finished that. I wound up being stationed on the USS Decatur, which is a guided missile destroyer in San Diego. Okay. So that was my trip out to California. So Colorado to Illinois, spent a little time in Virginia. And when I was in Virginia, that's when 9/11 happened. So, which again is one of those things where it's
like, especially being in the service.
Yeah, I mean that was you always say like. You only have like a handful of times in your life where you could say like this is like a monumental life-changing event.
Yeah.
Like birth of a kid or when you first met your wife, that kind of stuff. But I had just turned 20. I had just turned 20. My birthday was September 9th. So a couple nights before we were at a little Chinese restaurant in town, just like, be like, 1 more year I'll be able to buy drinks, man. This would be so cool. And then we were doing a class on the 400 hertz power converter. So we were in a lab, so like you do it in pairs. So you get 2 people from the class would go down, do the little lab. They go back and get 2 more, and you just cycle through that. So everybody else who's in the classroom you're just kind of like smoking and joking, that kind of stuff. And I was walking back from the lab, and I saw all these people crowded around the lounge.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? And I look in there, and everybody's looking at the television. I'm like, what's going on, guys? Oh, a plane hit a building. I'm like, what do you mean a plane? How's a plane hit a building?
Right.
Like, was he drunk?
It's so weird to hear you even describe this because I'm having like these weird flashbacks.
Yeah, no, it's that funny thing. It's like, everybody, it's one of those events that everybody kind of remembers where they were at.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So like, okay, that's someone hit a building. All right. So I walk back to the room where the other guy's like, oh yeah, your turn. And I was just by the lab and the plane hit a building. Yeah, shut up, Glasl. Like, no, good. So I go back over there and I start watching again. And as I'm watching, you see the second plane hit.
So crazy, yeah.
And it's one of those moments where it's just like, that first one wasn't an accident.
Mm-hmm. Man, I'm getting chills just hearing you talk about it.
But it's that, and again, then everybody's just like, it just comes dead silent, and what's going on, and then they come over the announce system on the building that we're in. It's like, okay, all non-essential personnel have to leave. There's been an attack at the Pentagon as well, which we were in Dahlgren, Virginia, which is just across the Potomac. So we're close to where the Pentagon was too. So it's just like, so they evacuate everybody, and then they send us out of the school, and we're back in our barracks, and the TV in the lounge, which was always set to either MTV or BET. Nothing was ever on that TV, but that was just on CNN.
Right.
For the next, couple days, and we're all just sitting there going like, "Holy crap!
Yeah,
this actually happened." And it's that, as a child of the 90s, you kind of grew up where, Desert Storm happened in 88. In the 90s, there's no, the biggest things were things like Somalia or, Yugoslavia, where it's just kind of, we're just chucking missiles at people. But it's like, wow, we're actually going to go to war.
Yeah.
As a 20-year-old, that's one of those things where it's like, wow, that really kind of puts things into perspective that you didn't really have before.
Yeah. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Did you... I'm just so curious.
Yeah.
Again, being in on the service, what was the spirit like in response to that? I mean, your colleagues and stuff. Was it fear? Was it anger? Was it a mix of all those things?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to like that stages of grief. Like you go through waves of like you're pissed, and then you're kind of scared, and then you're just like. Everybody's out there smoking, just like, oh, well, what if we do we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And like, we don't know anything that's going to happen, but we're just like, everybody's talking in like these raw terms, like what's going to happen.
Right. That's so crazy. Yeah. Mind blowing. It's so interesting. Sorry, I could get caught up thinking about that stuff. By the way, part of the reason I'm so fascinated by military, just to give you a little bit of background on my end, is my grandfather was a commander of a destroyer in the Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's
a tin can sailor.
Yeah, he was a career navalman, and my father was an orthopedic surgeon, and he was a doctor during sort of the draft for Vietnam and all that stuff. Or he was in school, and he always kind of carried with him, I think, this, I don't know what it was, this sense of mixed, weird sense of, and again, I could be wrong about this, but it felt like a sense of regret or, man, what would my life have been like had I, this sense of like,
what if I had turned left instead of right?
Exactly. And, some of my uncles were in Vietnam, and, so there's this interesting parallel lives that happen as a kid, and you're watching your dad, and he's reading military books, and he's absorbed with this side. Like that was what he enjoyed thinking about in his free time and pondering. And I think for me, I kind of carry that a little bit with me as a result. Yeah. And I've really plugged in with some of these like groups like Go Ruck, like these sort of like ex-military leaders who are teaching leadership skills to civilians. Because to me, it's been this interesting bridge between military life and civilian life that I don't think really exists. And I have cherished it, man. Like I've done like 8 or 9 of these Go Ruck events because you're in there with Green Berets and Navy SEALs and things like that, and they're teaching you leadership exercises while also pushing you physically. But the opportunity to just sort of like spend time learning from what they've learned, to me, I don't know, it's sort of helped me. It's helped me kind of heal is the wrong word, but it's helped me bridge that sort of feeling that I think my dad carried. I don't know. It's weird. It's almost like shared suffering. There's something about me suffering in the presence of these guys. It helps me. It's
funny you say shared suffering, because that is kind of a thing. You get any group of veterans together, and the first thing we'll start doing is start telling stories about the stupid things that have happened to us, because there's always that shared experience that guys who served have. That it is. It's kind of a cliche, but it really is a brotherhood of that, you don't know, man, you weren't there type of a thing. Yeah. And it's, I can say it's like I was in the Navy during the war. I never put my boots on the ground. I was always off the shore in an air-conditioned space, on a boat, getting 3 hots in a cot every day. But, so I'm thankful to the day I died that I never had to, get in it. Yeah. And I respect the hell out of the guys who actually did. But I have that experience that, most of the people in in the world just don't have. Yeah. And, it does change how you see things, because, I always say to everybody, it's like a lot of, because I went to college right afterward. So, people are stressed about, oh, I got this test and I got to do this project. It's like,
you're like, what?
Okay. And I was told, it's like, why aren't you, it's like, why aren't you so stressed? Like, because this isn't stressful. Totally. Like, everything else, I always tell people, it's like the volume on everything else kind of gets turned down to a certain extent. Yeah. But it is weird because, my brother, like I said, he just got out. And there's a definite transition when you go from military life to civilian life. And it takes a while to get used to it. Yeah. Like, it probably took me about 3 years before I would stop saying the F word every 3 words. Right. But it's that thing where it's like, you know, when you're in the military, it's like, I know every day, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing. I have that security of I'm getting my paycheck. I know what day I'm getting that paycheck. I know how much it's going to be. And then you get into civilian life where you're working jobs. It's like, and then, you know, that first time it's like, oh, I got laid off. Wait, what?
Yeah.
That's
a thing. Yeah.
You know, that idea is like, oh, I could lose my job, not because I did something wrong, just because, you know, the company is going under.
So fascinating.
Yeah. It's like, you know, the company didn't pay missed a pay, you know, this company I was working at didn't pay me one time. It's like, wait, what do you mean you're not going to pay my paycheck? You have to.
Yeah.
It just, you know.
So crazy.
Yeah. And it's that thing. It's like, you know, so there's those weird stresses that you never had to deal with before. So, you know, you find it's really kind of like relearning. And I always tell everybody, it's like my life is kind of broken up in those 3 sections, you know, high school, you know, when I was a kid through high school, military, post-military.
Yeah.
Because that chunk in the middle there is really just, it's like a whole nother life that I lived because it's so different from what civilian life is.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I've gotten further and further away from it, it becomes much more, you know, almost like a dream-like thing. Like it happened to somebody else because I'm not that person now that I was back then.
Yeah. Well, man, we're going to talk about games, but I have one final thought that I want to share, and I could talk about this stuff forever. So we should probably do another session just to talk about this stuff because I find it so interesting. But, you know, you said something that I find fascinating, which is when you were talking about school and tests and stuff. And this is one last thing I wanted to say because I found it so profound myself, where I remember being out on one of these Go Ruck challenges. And, you know, they last all night. You show up at like 9 p.m. and it doesn't end until like 11 a.m. in the morning, and you're carrying weight on your back and, you know, you're in and out of the ocean in the middle of the night or whatever. And you're sitting there with this, we call them cadre, right? This ex, you know, military guy. I think he was he was a Marine or something, but he went by the name Rage. Like that was his, you know, nickname or whatever. He's just a short guy, but incredibly fierce. And we had just gone in and out of the ocean multiple times, had done like the whole wave thing, like this, and we're freezing. We're sitting there in the sand, you know, covered in sand, had been in the sand, and he's like, look at you guys. This is probably like 2 a.m. He's like, how many people in the world do you think are doing this right now? Like he had that weird, wild look in his eye. And he was like, I was like,
nobody.
No one. he was like, he's like, no one. He's like, do you know what you're doing? He's like, you're pushing your comfort zone out. He's like, that's all special forces is. That's all what we train to do is taking where you're comfortable and where you're used to being, that sense of pressure, and just spending time pushing it outwards. So that when you face the test or when you face
it's less stressful.
You're like a little less, it's the first time I'd ever heard a practical reason for why doing something that weird had like real life, almost like implications on your mental chemistry. Well, I was like, oh, there is value to doing this beyond just this feeling I have, right?
Well, it's one thing that I always talk about when people bring, you know, getting back to games. It's like, you know, violent video games desensitize people. It's like, no, because you don't know what real violence is. But video game violence is not real violence. It's like, you know, people who grow up in the favelas of Brazil, they're desensitized to violence because violence is a part of their everyday life. You know, gunfire is a part of their everyday life. Getting shot at, shooting at people is a part of their everyday life. That's desensitization toward violence.
Right.
You know, that's, you know, when, you know, guys in the military, you know, people who have seen combat, they're desensitized to violence because they've experienced it. Playing a game is not the same thing. And you learn, like, I did some close quarter combat training when I was in the Navy, and you know, we used to always play. So on a game thing in the military, we used to play Halo tournaments in the ship.
Dude.
And what we would do is the ship had a LAN system, and we'd just plug our Xboxes into the ship's LAN, and we'd have Halo tournaments between different spaces on the ship. But it's that thing. It's like, so you know, I'm a gamer. I play violent video games, and then the first time just doing training where you're holding a real gun and you're shooting sim rounds at people, which is basically, it's a 9mm round with half the powder and a little paintball pellet thing. So it's got a little plunger, shoots a paintball at people.
Airsoft kind of thing?
No, it's a real gun. It's a real gun with real bullets. But it's just, instead of having a actual bullet round, it's a little paint pellet.
Got it.
And you're shooting that at people, and it's like, when you're doing it, it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of like paintball, but then you kind of take the step back. It's like, wow, yeah, I'm shooting a gun at people, and it's like, this is so much different than anything I've ever done. Just the sound of gunfire is so different than anything.
The feel, the sound.
It's movies and games, they don't do the justice to what the sound of an actual gunfight sounds like.
That's so interesting, man. Okay, I swear we're gonna shift to games. I could talk about that stuff so much.
Yeah.
So you leave the military.
Yep.
You're engaging in this new framework of civilian life, which I think, like you said, new expectations, new things to get used to. Where did that start? Did it start I'm curious where this art piece came in.
Okay.
Was this pre-military and then through military, or literally post?
So when I was in the military, I was on deployment. So again, I was on a ship. You realize quickly that there are literally 24 hours in every single day.
Sure.
Which sounds weird, except for imagine that for 8 months, you are wherever you work.
Yeah.
But you can't leave there. You wake up there, you work there. When work's done, you're still there. You sleep there, you eat there, and you can't go for a walk around the block. You're in that building for 8 months. Every 2 or 3 months, they let you outside for a week, but then you're back in the building that you work at for 3 months. And you realize just how, when you don't have cable television or these, like, you don't have internet access, like how much time there is in a day.
Oh man, I bet. Yeah.
So one thing I started doing is I just started drawing and sketching and doodling, and I started doing like a comic and that kind of stuff, just as a way to kind of fill the hours, and it's something, just I can kind of express myself creatively.
Yeah. Had you drawn in the past?
Yeah. So as a kid, I used to draw all the time.
Got it.
I always have like just sketchbooks full of drawings. This is just something I really enjoyed doing.
Got it. Okay.
But again, growing up where I did, art is not a career path.
Totally.
So as I was going through, it's like, I like, hey, I really enjoy this. This is fun. Never thought it'd be a career path. So I get out of the military, I go to college, and I was in a geology class.
Interesting.
And I was, before class, I was just sketching because I used to, like I said, I used to do a comic book.
Yeah.
So I was just in my notebook drawing a comic page.
Yeah.
And one of the ladies in the class comes, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just drawing. They're like, oh, that's really good. Have you ever thought of taking one of the illustration classes here? I'm like, not really. Like, she's like, hey, you should. It'll be fun. I'm like, oh, what the hell? I've got some electives to burn.
Yeah.
I'll go take an illustration class.
Awesome.
That was really kind of it, because it's like, started taking illustration classes, found out I had an aptitude for it. And then once community college was coming to an end, I was like, the professor was like, so what's your next plans? I'm like, I'll probably look at something like, UC Pueblo or something like that, something local that might have an art program. It's like, have you thought of like applying to an art school? I'm like, not really. I can't afford that. Like, apply, see if they offer you a scholarship. I'm like, oh, sure, why not? Yeah. So I applied to places like Rocky Mountain Academy of Art and Design, MCAD, and SCAD. SCAD got back to me and said, hey, you want to come and get your bachelor's degree for free? And I said, yes, I do.
I'll take you up on that.
So yeah, I got offered a full tuition scholarship to Savannah College of Art and Design. I'd never been to Georgia in my life.
Right.
I had never seen a school, but as someone who was, like I'm just on my little GI Bill.
Yeah.
A free college education. Yes, thank you. I will. I don't care where you are. I'll go.
Right. Yeah,
so I drove down to Georgia and going from cold, dry to hot, wet,
hot, humid, dude.
Just I got out of my truck the first day, and it's just like someone took a wet hot towel and went whap right in the face. Totally. It's like, why is it so sticky?
Man, my mom's whole family is from Jessup, Georgia, which is just a little more inland from Savannah.
All of Georgia is it's just swampland.
It is hot down there, man, for sure.
It's like when you actually see, it's the Okefenokee Swamp. It's like, oh, that's an actual place.
It's a real deal.
It's like, it wasn't just from the comic strip. It's a real place. And it is in the whole. Yeah, it's just giant swampland. It's like, I'm kind of a history buff, so you go to like the old Civil War forts and talking about how the Union soldiers were dragging cannons through the swamps, and it's like these were guys in wool uniforms in the middle of summer in Georgia, dragging cannons through the swamp. It's like, okay, yeah, that puts life into perspective.
That is stressful. Yeah, exactly.
That's perspective right there. Oh God, I gotta do all these projects, but at least I'm not dragging a cannon through the swamp
with wool pants on. Yeah, exactly, man. No, the perspective is huge.
Yeah. So when I was there, I was doing the sequential art department, which is comic books, because that's what I thought. I'll be a comic book artist.
Nice. Yeah.
So I was published in a couple of comics, but I started to realize it's just the idea of one, that it really doesn't pay that well. Like the amount of work you do for the pay that you get for comics just a lot of times isn't worth the investment. The idea is like, even if I'm getting paid like $120 a page, right, it takes me 10 hours to do a page, I'm getting paid $12 an hour. And it's like, I can't make a career out of that. And once you can work your way up to, like the level of like a Scotty Young or a Mark Brooks, where you're getting paid, $1,200 to just do a cover, and you do, 10 covers a month, you're making good money. But, it's like, I don't know if, I was like, I'm almost, I was 30. I'm like, I'm 30. I don't want to do that for the rest of my, I'm too late in the game to start grinding my way up that. I want to, eventually, get married and have a family. It's like, so I started focusing more in on the concept art side of things. And I had applied for the Riot internship.
Oh, cool.
And they actually, they liked my stuff enough that they flew me out to interview. And, going through, this is when they had their old campus off Colorado Street in Santa Monica. So I'm going through, and you see, there's the giant Annie statue. It's like, oh, this is, like, wow, this is like a viable career path. This is actually, and, I didn't get the internship, but it's like, they thought enough of me to bring me out there. It's like, maybe I can actually do this. Like, this might be my path to do something that's A, creative, and B, can make a career out of.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I noticed you did some work for Red 5 initially, right?
Well, no, Red 5 was a comic book company. It wasn't Red 5 Games. Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't.
No.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I thought it was the Red 5 that I know. So I was like, oh man, not only do you have the Fireforge story, but you have the Red 5 story. I want to talk about that.
No, Red 5 Comics was the
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Lots of Star Wars fans.
Yeah, dude, for sure, right? So let's talk about your first role in games then.
Yeah.
So how did you meet the Fireforge team?
So I was getting ready to graduate from my master's degree.
Okay.
And
where did you get your master's degree?
At SCAD as well. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
It was one of those things where they kind of invited me to, as I graduated from undergrad, they're like, oh, do you want to go to grad school, and we'll pay for that as well? I'm like, yes, I would love to have a free master's degree.
I keep saying yes.
I will never deny free money.
So you got your master's degree from SCAD as well. How did you find out about Fireforge?
It was one of those things where you go on, you're just kind of firebombing for companies, just as I need a job. I just graduated, so I found Game Dev Map, which was the site back, and you just click, all right, every single company, just click them open, go to their careers page, and look for job openings. So I was just started firebombing resumes everywhere. And Fireforge was one of, I think, 2 that got back to me. The other one was down in Austin, Texas. And it's like, I would, because after I'd left San Diego, I was like, I really like California. I'd like to get back. And so it's like, San Diego, it's like, it's Orange County. Okay, yeah, I can deal with the Orange County. So I did like a little bit of contract work for them. And then, they moved me on to, they're like, okay, we'll help you move out. And so I was working with guys like Kevin Beardsley and Tim Campbell and those guys who, and they brought me in, and I was fresh out, first job ever, and I got, and they had just worked out a deal with Tencent to make a demo,
right? Or like
it's like a MMO type of game, and they brought on Christian Leitner as the art director.
Yeah.
So we both basically started there the same day. So like my first job, I'm working with Chris Leitner. And it's like,
this is awesome. Yeah, as a comic book fan.
Yeah, as a comic fan, but also he was art director for D3. So it's like here I'm just, here's crash course of like one of the best guys to work with to learn the craft of being a concept artist.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things like just devouring like everything he taught me. It's like, it's the thing is like, it still used so much of what he taught me there. And it's like, it's just awesome.
I just recently had a chance to chat with Christian on the phone.
Yeah.
I obviously know of his exploits in the industry, but it was the first time I'd personally connected with him.
Yeah.
Man, what a fascinating guy.
Oh, no, he's a character.
Christian, if you're out there, I want you on this podcast. You know
Yeah,
that? He, what an impressive, smart, intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously talented, but
yeah,
what was it like working with
again,
him?
it's that thing is he really
What
knows.
are the things that he impressed upon you? I'm just curious to hear if you had to distill some of his takeaways.
Well, again, he really kind of understands the theory of like visual design, that kind of stuff. Like, when you're talking about like, hey, we've got to make a faction of enemies, and like, okay, how do we, create a cohesive design language? Plus, like, how do we say this is the base one, this is a level up, this is a level up, this is a level up?
Right.
What concepts do we use to communicate to the player like this is a better version of this?
Right.
Where you have like a mid-tier guy and then the guy right above him. It's like, what do you do to this guy to make him look like he's more important than this guy, while keeping the visual language the same? You know? And it's just a lot of like really like strong theory of this is why we do what we do. This is how we get to the decisions we make. And one of those things too, I learned from him a lot is this idea of, I think a lot of companies, at least in the concept side of things, they fall into this idea of, we'll just have the artist do 50 silhouettes, and then we'll pick from there. And then we'll have the artist do 50 roughs, and we'll pick from there. And then we'll have them do 50 heads, and we'll pick a head. And then we'll have them do 50 guns, and we'll pick a gun. And what starts happening is you create this kind of Frankenstein monster where it's just a bunch of, well, I like this head, and I like this body, and I like this thing. And then you jam them all together, and it's just this mess of visual information that, because every part was designed interdependent of the other, there's no cohesion, there's no focus, and it's just like you kind of have these weird Frankenstein, like I said, a Frankenstein monster of all these disparate parts put together. And the idea of kind of working holistically, like design a character complete. It doesn't do you any good if you're just iterating for the sake of iteration, if you're just making shapes for the sake of making shapes. If there's no reason behind it, why are you doing it?
Exactly.
If you're just, as Lightner would always say, it's shapes for the sake of shapes. Why this shape? What does this communicate to the player? What does it say about the character? What does it say about this? So the idea of like, instead of just doing 100 iterations, let me do 5 that are on a theme. If those 5 don't work, then we need to go back and talk about what are the themes we're trying to hit. As opposed to me just sitting there and just cranking out stuff. Like, let's go back and let's distill, like, what do we want to communicate? What do we want the player to know? What's this character's role? What are their attacks? What is their backstory? And as you work, kind of with design and narrative, and you kind of start understanding these things, that's where you start to really get the essence of what you're looking for.
That's awesome.
I think, especially from a character design standpoint, but environments as well, and just concept as a whole, you always want to make sure that you're always wanting to communicate something to a player. And a lot of times as a concept artist, you'll get like something from a designer says, oh, well, we want this character and we want him to have this and then this, and they'll start listing off all these things that they think
technical things.
Well, not even that. A lot of times they'll think of things that are like, they'll put in their narrative ideas of like what they want in there. And a lot of times it's, not to speak bad of designers, but for the most part, they're not artists. So they're coming at it from like, hey, I like thing. I want to see thing represented in here. And it's kind of my job as a concept artist to say, cool. Let's think about this though. What are we trying to communicate? If I understand you may like the idea that he's got sword with 3 blades, but what does that tell the player?
What's the thing behind the thing?
What's the reason that is there? What is the reason why they have these things? What are we trying to communicate to the player? We're if we're just putting stuff in because we think it's cool, you're going to miss out on that idea of this is what the character's about.
I got it.
You
Yeah.
know? And it's one thing I learned early on is this idea is like, make it about something.
That's interesting.
Everything you make should be about something. This idea of, I was playing a game last night and it had this really cool character. Oh, what was it? Oh, he had a thing. This was this guy with this, he had these big angel wings and a flaming battle axe. Okay, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or not, it's a thing that I can describe to someone in a sentence.
Yeah.
Anytime someone, tell me about the character you want to make. Oh, well, 1,000 years ago, it's like, stop. You're talking backstory.
Right.
You're talking all these things that I can't, it's impossible to visually show on a person. Like you're talking, where they grew up. It's like, because a lot of times they're like, oh, this character grew up in a little fishing village, so they should have a fish hook thing on them somewhere. It's like, yeah, but they're a soldier. Why do they need to have a fish hook?
Right. They're older now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like this is an army captain.
Yeah.
He's not going to be carrying around a fishing pole just because he grew up in a fishing village.
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So
no, it makes sense, man. I love what you're saying too about sort of the essence behind the creative decision of give this guy a 3-bladed sword or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's something super interesting about that as a meta concept where, take for instance, Heroes of the Storm as a MOBA. There's always this argument of like, oh, well, the game doesn't really need a narrative or doesn't really need to say a thing. Like, let's not overthink that. And I think there's some value to that in multiplayer games where you don't overthink it. But I think the thing that I'm fascinated about is in the absence of intent, meaning like directed intent by the decisions that you're making. Intent is being sown, my baby. You know what I mean? You're saying something in the absence of your intent, whether you intended to or not. Like, there is an undergirding behind these decisions that reads to a player. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is it is super important to be intentful about those things.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're sort of neglecting your responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're sending a message that you don't really intend. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, I don't know what you would call that. I think, to me, it speaks a little bit of the supremacy of this spirit of narrative, even though it's not necessarily backstory. It is a spirit of a thing that you're sort of putting forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's the thing I always tell people. It's like, backstory isn't story.
Right.
Backstory is part of a character, but it's not the story.
The story, yeah.
Story is a character and a plot. The two can't exist without the other. It's the idea is that people talk, it's a plot-driven story, it's a character-driven story. It's like, no, you can't have a plot without a character, and you can't have a character without a plot.
Right.
Indiana Jones is a good character because we liked Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
We liked The Last Crusade. To a lesser extent, we liked Temple of Doom.
Right.
But Indiana Jones,
I like how you didn't put the crystal skull thing in there. You just sort of left that one off.
But I'm saying, but that's the thing is, if Indiana Jones were only Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we would not like Indiana Jones. No. We like Batman.
Right.
We like Batman because we like things like Batman Year One, The Long Halloween, 1984 Batman, Christian Bale's Dark Knight Batman.
Yeah.
If Batman were just Batman and Robin, or the Adam West Batman, we wouldn't like Batman.
No.
Because Batman is only the only thing that Batman is the story he's going through.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I totally love that. My background before games was as an actor, and as an actor, I had to learn that the thing that is the most important in your work is truly the story. And the story is even more important than the words. So this idea that I would be concerned about what people think of me and my performance, it does not even belong, because the story is preeminent. My obsession as an actor is serving the story, becoming a vessel for the story. That's how I should judge myself, not whether this person thinks I'm a good actor. It's like, no, how am I serving this story? Because that's the thing people come to see. Sometimes people come to see a star or a celebrity, but really the reason theater exists, or the reason our desire to share in stories exists, is because the stories have meaning for us, right? And as an actor trying to do their job well, it ultimately is, how fit a vessel can I be for this story, right? Like absence of my ego, absence of all these things, like facilitate that first, right? And that to me is super profound because like you're saying, it is the stories that have meaning and it is the stories that are giving the characters value and all of that, right?
Well, it's I think it was Amy Hennig. She said something like the idea of even in video games, the story is more important than any game system or any graphics that you do. You know, if the story's good, people will play the game. They will enjoy it. Whether they ever replay it again or not, if they enjoyed that story that you gave them, if you gave them that good experience, they're going to buy the sequel. And they're going to buy the sequel to that. They're going to buy the sequel to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought every single Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver game, that even the bad ones like THQ did there at the end, just because I really liked that world and that story that they had built in Soul Reaver.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same reason I buy every Fallout game except Fallout 76, just because I don't like that type of game. You know, I was just like, I don't want to play a battle royale, but I love this deep narrative world that they've created, and I like the stories that they tell in there. And that's why I'll keep coming back. It's why I keep coming back to Borderlands. It's why I keep coming back to these franchises that I like. You know, whether they hit every time or not, I know that I'm going to get a certain experience out of this world and the stories that they tell in it.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
I love it. So we got down this path through Christian, which I think is awesome and super talented dude. I want to hear a little bit more about Fireforge. Fireforge, I think for folks who are probably listening, is you either know about it or you don't, because it was kind of even though it lasted for many years, this company, it didn't have a lot to show publicly, though I know you guys worked on a lot behind the scenes. And I think the only public offering was the Ghostbusters movie tie-in, right?
Yep.
Which compared to the other work you guys are doing, I'm sure you're like,
it's funny because
not to overly down that project.
It was a bad game. we knew it was when we were working on it, but I was a huge Ghostbusters fan as a kid. Yeah. So the idea that I got basically to be the lead concept artist on a Ghostbusters game was awesome.
Totally.
Now, there's problems working with like Sony Films and that kind of stuff, but there's always problems when you're working with tie-in and that kind of stuff. But so when I got to Fireforge, they had just signed a big deal with Tencent they were working on like a MOBA League of Legends type game, but when I got there, they had kind of shifted to being much more of a narrative driven. So it was going to be more single player type of experience. Some multiplayer, but not like matches, but actually have a narrative structure to it. Yeah. So we were designing this really huge, awesome demo level that we were going to show to Tencent and say, this is kind of like a mixture of Diablo and League of Legends and with some narrative in it. And we made this huge, awesome demo, and it went all the way through GR3. We plastered that with flying colors, and then just because of a couple things that kind of happened on the executive side, it kind of fell apart. And then there's some kind of shady things that happened behind the scenes with some of the executive level stuff at Fireforge as well. And then that was.
Can you talk about the shady stuff, or you don't have to if it's uncomfortable?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these people still kind of work. So
it's a small industry.
It's a small industry. Don't burn any bridges, people.
No, it's funny. Our tie together on Fireforge, even though I obviously didn't work there, was the fact that numerous employees from 38 Studios, which had recently crashed and burned in a royal story. And if you don't know that story, you should go just Google 38 Studios. Found their way to Fireforge. Yeah. So I was remarking to Dan before we started this podcast, as Thomas connected us and I was looking through his history, I'm like, this industry is so small. If I don't know you, you know the people I know, right? Yep. Like it is literally just one step removed. Yeah. And I find that really fascinating because to your point, like you really should have good relationships with the people in this industry. And
I mean, it's the thing.
It's so small, and you never want to. I mean, in general, in life, you never want to.
Oh no, you never want to burn any bridges.
But in games in particular, as you start to realize just how small everything is, and
again, there's always this. This thing is like, if you're a nice person, you're fun to work with. People are going to want to work with you.
For sure.
It's like two of the 4 jobs I've gotten is because I know people who were there. You know, Fireforge, I didn't know anybody. I got brought in because I was a junior level with some decent skills.
Yeah.
You know, after that went down, I went over to White Moon Dreams because I knew some people who had left Fireforge. We had worked with the owner of that company before, so that was my in over there. Then when I left White Moon Dreams, I went over to Blind Squirrel for a bit, based just on my portfolio. I didn't know anybody over there.
Yeah.
But then when I left Blind Squirrel, hey, inXile, I know people there.
Right.
That gets me in the door. I mean, and that's a big thing, is just being able, because especially when you're talking like bigger companies, it's like they get thousands of applications to everything. It's like if you know somebody, it helps you get to that next step. If you reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff, if you form relationships with these people, that helps you get into the door. It's like
It's interesting. I remember as a young professional, I used to be frustrated, particularly in the arts in New York City, about like how that was the case.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, clearly I'm going to all these auditions, but these directors just are working with the same people that they know. And I used to kind of be like, man, that's a bummer. I don't understand that. They should give people more. But the more I've grown up, the more I'm like, I want to work with the people I know.
Yeah.
Like, now that I'm in a decision to get to kind of make those decisions, or I'm like, no, why wouldn't you choose the known quantity over the unknown? Like it's actually the more responsible decision.
Yeah, especially when it's like I know this person, I know their work, I know how they are to work, because working with somebody, especially, I mean, it's something I learned in the military. It's like when you're stressed, you want to be around people who are you like working with, and
they deal with the stress well. Right? They just cope well.
Yeah, right? I mean, because when you get to the end of a project and you're crunching, you're going to want to be around people who are going to still come in and do what they got to do, and are not going to be those people who come in and just bring everybody down.
Right.
Things are stressful enough. You don't want people. You want someone who will come in there and get people laughing. We'll get people spirit up. You don't want someone who comes in and just like, oh, this is BS, man. Because that always happens, and it's like sometimes you need to be able to say that, and you need to trust people that when they say that, it's not going to affect their work. But you want to make sure you're working with people who have, it sounds cliche, but a positive attitude, because it helps. It helps. There's nothing worse than trying to be creative when you're feeling miserable.
Right.
Like if you can't, it's hard to tap into that creativity if you're just down.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Now, as someone who was on the inside when Fireforge went down, not to we'll move on from this, but as someone who went through the 38 Studios thing, I'm curious what that was like. Was the sort of the downfall of that, the moment where everything started to crumble, was that something you could see coming, or did it kind of hit blindly to someone at your level? So 38 Studios to me was I did not see it coming. Yeah, and there were certainly people in the leadership tier above mine that could see it coming. Yeah, but I was shocked how far gone 38 Studios was by the time I became aware and the paycheck stopped coming or whatever. Right? Like, what was that like for you in the Fireforge?
So I mean, it started. The idea is like, okay, hey guys, we lost this project, which and I will always give them this. They were very straightforward with us of what was happening. They didn't hide stuff from us, which I will always appreciate from that, because there's nothing worse than when people are dishonest with you about what's happening, where they'll tell you one thing, but the reality is something else. And that, to me, that's always such a betrayal. It's like you got to be straightforward with me. I mean, I'm trusting you to do what's best for the company always, but I also trusting you to let me know, like, if I'm about to lose my job, I need to know this. If you tell me one thing like, oh, everything's gravy, and then we come back from Christmas and then half the studio gets laid off, it's like, okay, then you just lied to me, really, and I can't accept that. That's something where it's like, I'm not going to put my trust in you if you don't put your trust in me, type of a thing. So with Fireforge, we knew we lost the project, and then we knew we had that lifeline with Ghostbusters, but we knew that was a very short lifeline, and it would always be, is like, this is going to just keep us in the studio for this amount of time, unless we can get something else. And then, you know, as time goes by, and you're like, yeah, we haven't signed anything, you kind of understand, like, yeah, it's going down, and
So you kind of had a sense that it was.
But again, it's what I was saying before, is this idea is like, this is the first time I'd ever lost a job.
I see.
Like, so, you know, it was stressful, like seeing people who, you know, I'd worked with being laid off. Like, these are my friends, and now they're gone.
Yeah.
And it was a really, it was a very stressful time for me.
Totally.
And, you know, again, I talk about, like, certain stresses won't bother me, but it's like something like that where it's like, this is such a different experience where I'm, you know, people who are my friends that I've been working with for 2 years are now gone. And it's like, wait a second. And now I'm looking at, oh, you know what? I might lose my job, and I don't have another job lined up yet. And it's like, oh my God, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to do this? It's like, that's extremely stressful. You know, it puts an incredible strain on your whole life. You know, your personal relationships too. Everything suffers from that.
Oh man, yeah. Thinking back on the 38 Studios moment, that was just such a weird upheaval to be walking into government buildings and to be like, my wife is pregnant at the time 38 Studios went down. She was, I think she was probably 35 weeks pregnant. It was pretty crazy. Like,
well, again, especially out here.
We lost our insurance, we lost our, like, all those things. And when I was super grateful for the job offer from Blizzard, and I had to do my hunt for that as well. But she had to fly out here 37 weeks pregnant. So it was like, it was like literally the last day that she could leave, and I had to stay behind, pack up the apartment, get everything moved. But dude, talk about stressful. And this industry can be hyper brutal.
It can be. It's. I mean, it is a very mercenary industry. This idea that, you know, very few people work at any companies for, you know, long amounts. It's when I got to visit Blizzard before, and it was one of those things where it's like, oh, you see the shields, and it's like, that's, to me, that's kind of cool, where you have people who have found a way to stay at a company for so long. But it's
super rare.
It's rare. It's very rare. Especially if you're working at indie studios, just because indie studios just rise and fall every year. And, you know, if you're lucky, you can work on something good before it goes down.
It's kind of crazy, because there are other industries like that, like the film industry is sort of, you know, itinerant, I guess you would say, in that way. But games requires sometimes an even longer investment of time. So there's something, I think, a little bit more hard to bear about games in that sense, because these projects can take 2-3 plus years, you know, maybe longer, depending on the game that you're working on. And so you feel rooted in it, but the ultimate, you know, tenuous nature of everything is still as tenuous as it could be. So
it's like one of the times when you finally find one of those jobs where it's like, oh, there's some stability here. It's like, oh, thank God.
Exactly. No, I mean, inXile is probably an interesting spot in that regard now that you're part.
Now
of
that
Microsoft.
we're part of the Microsoft family, it's like, okay, you know what? That's because again, I'd gone from Fireforge, White Moon, and these companies where it's like up and down and up and down and up and down. And then it's like here, it's like, oh wait, you mean we're not hustling to get our next gig's already, you know, funded? What? That's pretty amazing. That's pretty cool.
Well, let's talk about inXile. So you joined prior to that, though, right? You were working with them prior to the Microsoft thing?
No. I got in like probably, I think, 4 or 5 months after Microsoft.
Okay, awesome, great. I was going to ask what that transition was like between prior to after, but that's pretty great. So, what is that relationship like? Do you experience the Microsoft side of things at all, or is it mostly?
I mean, it's the same. They kind of are hands off with us too. I mean, as far as from my day to day, they really kind of let us do a lot of our thing. The funny thing is, you know, once you get part of a big company, is like there's the corporate training videos.
Oh, dude, you got to go through it.
But it's so amazing, because it's Microsoft, so there's like money behind them, so they're like big production, polished things. But it's like, you know, they're talking about, oh, if you have a client, don't take them to a football game unless you invoice it. It's like, okay, that's never going to come up in my job.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know who's going to football games.
I'm sure there's plenty of people who work in Washington State that have to, you know, deal with big international clients, but I'm just the concept artist down in Southern California.
That's hilarious, man. So. And what you're working on? What right now?
Wasteland 3.
Wasteland. Okay, great, awesome.
So it's been a very fun project to work on. Just because it's one of those things where it's like, it's what I love about being a concept artist in video games, that kind of stuff, is you really get to kind of play in a lot of different sandboxes. So my first job, at Fireforge, we were doing something that was very fantasy, very kind of almost, super stylized, kind of that getting close to World of Warcraft, but with even maybe like a little bit of Final Fantasy type stuff that influence into it. But big, you probably saw that one with the blacksmith with his giant hammer, and it's like superhero fantasy type of a thing. Yeah, and then you go into something like Ghostbusters, which is
cartoony,
very cartoony, but it's like it's got this world that is it's like science, but our world kind of grounded, but we're doing it very stylized. So there is that. Then I go over to White Moon Dreams, and we're working on Starblood Arena, which was really big sci-fi. These really cool ships and these big character pilots, and these awesome epic arenas that you're fighting in. And then we were working on another project that didn't pan out, but it's this idea, it's this alien world, and you have this character who's like a scavenger, and they had their little mule.
I think I saw some of your concepts on your art station. It's cool.
Oh no, if we could have figured that one out, that it could have been really cool. Just this, it's the thing I like about VR. If it ever takes off, that you can do with it, is just the scale you can work with. There's nothing quite like the ideas like where
when the camera's automatically face level, you have
where I'm literally standing underneath this 50-foot tall robot that's stomping around. It's like, okay, this is so cool. It's like, this is epic.
That is epic, man. It's coming, man. The Index and Alex is going to be fascinating to watch. We get to see this. We get to see someone really put I guess we'd call it a AAA offering forward, though there are some incredible games already on VR. This Alex one is really going to be interesting to see how people respond.
Well, I just love this idea that with a lot of this VR stuff is we're almost getting back to having arcades again. It is that the Way of the Force or whatever, the one that at Disneyland.
Totally.
Which is, me and my wife just did it for we've been meaning to do it for like 2 years, but we finally did it like a couple weeks ago. It was such a cool experience. This idea that you put on the gear, you have your headset, and then you look down and, hey, I'm a stormtrooper. And there's my wife, and she's a stormtrooper. And we're running through this level, and I touch a door, and there's a door there, and I grab a handle and I pull it, and cool. I'm getting physical interaction. I'm holding a blaster and I'm shooting a blaster. It's like this is what VR should be. It's like this. I am transported into this world where I am part of it. It's like we always talk about, like, once they figure out how to make those omnidirectional treadmills that are cheap enough and durable enough that you can use them, like, I can't wait to play Fallout.
I was about to say the Fallout game.
Like a Skyrim or Fallout, where I'm in this gigantic open world where I'm walking around and doing, seeing all these things as myself. It's like, that is so cool to me.
That's going to be a heavy price tag to get that treadmill.
It's going to be huge, but hey, you know what?
It'll be worth it.
Hey, right now you can buy a 70-inch plasma LCD TV for $500. I remember when I first got out, I had a 40-inch that cost me $2,400. Eventually the price will come down, but
we may be 60.
Yes, but I'll still have it.
Exactly.
I'll use my wheelchair in it, damn it.
Oh, dude. All right, so Wasteland, awesome. What can you tell me about how you guys are working on that game, and is there anything you can share?
We've put out a couple demos, and a few trailers. The last trailer, you actually get to see one of my characters, and the Patriarch was one of the characters I designed. So that was awesome. Oh yeah, he's pretty dope of a character.
But what's the timeline for you guys? Have you announced?
Yes, I think March.
Okay, so that's soon.
It's coming up. That's I think pre-orders March, but I think maybe May. I don't know, but we've announced. I just don't have it off the top of my head. It's one of the M months.
You go
March or
May. Do your work. You will launch.
Yes. Well, again, that's the thing with concept too. Is like, as a project winds down, actually my workload tails off, where everybody else, they kind of ramp up until launch, and then everybody's going mad as we reach the thing. Concept, you're really front loaded, and you tail off as the project goes on.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Yeah, we're one of the. I think we're one of the only disciplines where it's like, as the project goes on, we have less to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But, at the beginning, we're running around with our hair on fire because we have all these people waiting on us.
Yeah.
We have character artists and environment artists and VFX. Everybody's waiting on us to do something. So it's like, we always want to be ahead of the game in pre-production. If you're lucky enough to get a pre-production, that is.
Exactly.
Especially at indie studios.
You're sprinting.
Indie studios. Oh, it's pre-production. Oh, you got a week.
Yeah, exactly.
What? Yeah, come up with the look of the game in a week.
Well, let's talk about that. I actually think that's a side of, that high end of your workload, I think is super fascinating to me, because this idea of world building or setting a tone or choosing a style or figuring out what your visual language is for a game is super fascinating. And I'm curious to get your take on how you approach those things. There's no perfect and only way to do this, right?
No.
And it's fascinating because I think I'm working with a team right now where we're discussing some of these things, and my bent is very visual. Like I love to look at other, go through Pinterest or go through ArtStation and find things where I'm like, oh man, that's so inspiring. I don't think that's our art style, but like there is a spirit of what's going on in this image that fits. Let me pull this here. Let me pull this here.
Yeah.
I work very visually. Others work very text driven. They'd rather just see the ideas written and then pass them over to someone like you to get that stuff done. Like, how do you approach it? Or how would you, if someone came to you and said, I need to come up with a high level art style and design for this new world.
Yeah.
How would you encourage them to start?
Well, I think you have to start with the story first, because the story is going to kind of identify everything else from that, because everything that you do visually should be there to reinforce the narrative.
Absolutely.
So, again, I have a background in comics, that kind of stuff. So if we always start with a story first. You don't start drawing a comic and then come up with a story later.
Right.
It's like, because you know what you're going to want to say. And I'm of the opinion that you should always be wanting to say something. If you're writing a story, you should have something you want to say with it.
I completely agree.
Because we all like, we enjoy things like Transformers, these aren't things that really resonate. It's like a guilty pleasure. Like, I'm gonna eat McDonald's today, so I'm gonna watch Smoking Aces. Right. It's like, it's a terrible movie. It's an awful story, but there's just something about it I like and I enjoy, and it's my Big Mac of creative media.
Totally.
But it's like, if I'm going to be
like
spending
isekai in anime, I'm the same way about that. Where I'm like, these RPG anime shows, there's not much going on, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, if I'm going to be spending the next 3 years of my life on something, we only get to make so many games in our life.
Yeah,
I want to make something that I feel strongly about. I'm not looking to just make, we're going to make Hello Kitty shopping adventure, and it's just to make it. It's like, okay, that's great. I'm sure if there's plenty of people out there that it's like, to them it is just that job, and I'm just here to collect my paycheck. I'm going to make something that's going to make me some money. I'm going to go home and I've got my other things I do. I guess maybe coming at it from the creative side of things as a concept artist, like, I have to spend a lot of time thinking about stuff. Yeah. Like this is, if you're an engineer or something, you're designing systems that, to do a task, but like, I'm trying to come up with something whole cloth. Like this is, I'm trying to find an emotional impact to it. I'm trying to find these things to it. So I need to have something that I kind of care about to a certain extent that helps me to be better at what I'm doing. If I care about it. Like, obviously you're not going to care about everything you work on. You have to force yourself to, like, okay, what's the, my wife actually asks me this sometimes too. Is like, how do you get motivated if you don't really care? It's like, you have to find something in it that you're win. It's like, if I'm designing something, it's like, they want this specific thing. It's like, I don't really, it's like, okay, whatever. How do I force myself to put that effort in? I'm going to find one victory in this. I'm going to find one element that I'm going to want to put my, little spin on and say, it's this, but I've got this in here. And this thing I actually think is interesting and it's cool. And I can hang my hat and say,
that's cool.
That's something that I think is interesting, because, it's like, oh, we're going to have this faction of cannibal clowns. It's like, okay, that's been done. Yeah. Everybody's has. The killer clowns from outer space has been done. It's like, okay, what can I do for this that is a little bit different, that it's something that I find interesting. How can I tweak it just a little bit that I satisfy the people who are asking for it? Because I'm not gonna fight, get into a big fight about this, because it's something that doesn't matter. But like, okay.
That's so important, man.
Yeah.
Like, what you're getting at right there is so critical, because it's very easy to get bent out of shape that like your opinions or the things that you value aren't necessarily shared by the leadership or shared by other people, where you know what you're thinking is a great idea.
Yeah.
And maybe you just fail at communicating it, or maybe they're not giving you the time to showcase it. Okay, I get it. You have to kind of fall in line in some ways.
Yeah.
But that ability to hold on to an element of it that brings you joy. I absolutely love, and I have some really funny examples of those kinds of things. Like I remember, this is an inside story from Heroes, but we were working on a holiday Christmas event, and Trevor Jacobs, who was the art director on Heroes of the Storm at the time, we'd come up with this really fun concept around a skin for Mephisto from Diablo, super dark, demon, right? Obviously. And we had turned him into a stuffed animal, almost like a really broken Teddy Ruxpin. Like his arm had ripped off, and all the lightning that, because he had lightning abilities, is almost like a Toy Story deformed Teddy Ruxpin version, because the whole theme was toys. And, the leadership was like, It's like, why aren't you excited about this? This is a great idea. Exactly. And the thing I loved about what Trevor did is, even though it didn't get at the time turned into a skin, he pushed it into the key art. He pushed it into all these things. So it became this little seed that the community could look at and be like, oh, dude, that's so awesome. I love that. When are we going to see that skin? It becomes this little thing where it's like, hey, well, I got to make this decision. So anyways, to your point, I think, especially in collaborative efforts like that, finding those moments of joy, even if they're small, that you can be super satisfied on, so helpful.
You have to do it, because again, it's one of the things I love about games as opposed to, say, like comics. Because comic books, it's one of the greatest storytelling mediums there is. There's so much you can do with comics that you just can't do with anything else. And I love drawing them. I love it. But it is a very isolated existence, being a comic book artist.
Right.
What I love about games is it is so collaborative. That, it's the thing, is like people talk, oh, we have too many meetings. Like, no. I want meetings. This is where we talk about stuff and figure out like how we're going to do things, to make it better. It's like, I've heard stories about companies that are trying to do it where like everybody works remote, and it's like, that would be hell for me.
Man, I'm in a situation like that right now, and it's challenging because I think, to your point, and I do think something's missing, and maybe there's a way to solve that. Maybe there's a Slack tool or a thing that's going to solve that at some point, but there is something missing. And I think what you're getting at is this fact that we are the joint sum of our talents, right? And when you bring myself and you together, we're not just additive. There is actually something that lives between us that brings value, and you add that amongst an entire group, then there is this thing that you can't have without these people,
exactly,
right? And I think that what you're getting at there is it really does carry into the product. And I think I understand the necessity to work remotely, because particularly as the cost of living gets higher and the need to do to survive as a startup, but do ambitious work, like there has to be these solves. And so, but you question, how do we get that magic back? Right?
Exactly. Well, again, it's what we talk about, this idea of just even as a concept art, reference art. I am only limited by what I know and what I like. So everything I do is a reflection of the things I know and the things I like. So every design I make is going to have that bit of me in it. But I am only limited by what I know. So if I'm going to be doing something, that's where reference comes in. It's like, I need to see people who know, like, I'm passionate about certain things. If I'm going to be creating let's say a wasteland, I'm working on Wasteland.
Totally.
There are people who spend their entire lives building, post-apocalyptic stuff.
You should look at that.
I should be looking at them.
They spent a lot of time.
Yeah, it's because they're subject matter experts. It's like, if I'm going to build a house, I'm gonna look at what architects do. It's like I'm not so arrogant that I say I know more about this than an architect. No, I'm gonna see what's a house I like. Yeah. Oh, that's a cool design. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna put it into my design because that's a better idea than I could have come up with.
Totally.
Just from what I know, I don't. Hey, look, this person is good. They know stuff. They've done something really well. I'm gonna take some of this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add it into mine. Yeah. And I'm going to make something better than I could have ever done on my own. And I think it's not just concept, but it is the game itself. This idea of, if you're a designer and you're creating systems and that kind of stuff, you're not going to you don't want people to tell you how to do your job, but say, hey, does this communicate what I want it to communicate? Is this fun?
Yeah.
Is this, you may be really excited about some, aspect of a type of game, but if people play and go, it's like, yeah, they're going, it's not because they don't understand it. It's because it's just not resonating.
Yeah.
If I have a design that I might like, if I show it to a bunch of people and they go, it's like, it's because I failed.
Right.
It's because I didn't communicate what needed to be communicated in an interesting enough way.
Dude, I love what you're saying there.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to this whole ethic of service. I call it ethic of service, or this idea that what we do is for an audience.
Yes.
And if for some reason I'm not communicating to them or the story isn't carrying, it's not their fault. They're not bad listeners.
Yeah.
They're not, they're showing up. Yeah. All their job is to show up. It's your job to communicate. Yeah. It's your job to serve, right? And I love the audience being sort of primary in that way, like the most important part.
Yeah.
Because we all have our opinions about what we think is smart or cool and all that stuff. But dude, if it is not serving, I don't think we're doing our job. Yeah.
But again, too, and then you also have to be careful to not go too far into that and let the audience dictate to you.
There's a balance.
Oh yeah. Well, to use a sports analogy, it's like the more you listen to the fans, the quicker you'll be sitting with them.
Right. I completely understand.
Yeah, because it's something my wife and I talk about all the time, is this idea of we watch television shows, we consume the story. We just finished watching The Good Place.
Yeah,
like fantastic series, well written, interesting characters. Once the finale went up, she went and started looking at some of the fan reaction, and it's just like, and some of them it's just like it's this vitriolic. It's like, did you guys not watch the show? Like, did you miss the core concept of the show?
Right.
And it's that thing where it's like, if you listen to, it's the same thing when I was in comics. Like, if you listen to comic book fans and you only give them what they're asking for, you're dead in the water.
Man, it's so interesting. My analogy on this, I equate it to, and this isn't to belittle your customers, but like, when you are accountable for a thing, you're responsible for it. I think a lot in terms of parenting, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a parent. I have 4 kids, and I'm accountable for what their life is like.
Yeah.
I'm accountable for what how they live, right? And what I'm giving them. And it doesn't mean that they don't have really great suggestions about how to improve our family. Yeah. They do, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're right and I am wrong, right? But ultimately I am accountable, right? And so there's this element of it's not their job to be accountable. That's my job. This is my family, my wife and mine. We're accountable, right? And there's, so that, to your point, there's this spirit of accountability that I don't let my kids decide.
Yeah.
That would be irresponsible on my part as well.
Yeah.
But I also need to be listening to them.
Yeah.
Because I have blinders and things that I can't see as well. And I can improve how I do family, right?
Yeah. But and again, it's something you always see in the game industry, especially, is the idea of a game hits, makes a lot of money. Now we have 20 indie studios that are now trying to make the next. When I started, everybody was trying to make the next League of Legends.
Yeah.
Then everybody was trying to make the next Overwatch.
Well, first was World of Warcraft. Now
So before I was in games, everyone was trying to make the next World of Warcraft.
Right.
Then everybody was trying to make the next League of Legends. Then everybody's trying to make the next Overwatch. Then everybody's trying to make the next PUBG.
Yeah. Fortnite,
PUBG. And it's that thing where it's like, those already exist.
Yeah.
You can't make that again. The best you can do is make a facsimile of it with probably that's not going to be as good because you don't have the money and the team behind it.
Totally, you're already behind on feature sets and
it's why are people going to leave the game they love to play a lesser version of that.
Right.
So that's the danger of chasing trends. And the idea is, well, this is what people want. People didn't know they wanted Fortnite.
Yeah, even Fortnite didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
Fortnite didn't know what people. Yeah, until it happened.
Yeah.
And then people realized this is what I wanted, and nobody knew until they had it. Nobody knew they wanted a story about a kid who goes to a wizard school.
Yeah,
until they got it.
Literally, yeah.
Nobody,
even poor J.K. Rowling couldn't get that off the ground with the publishers.
Yeah,
for so many
nobody
times.
knew they wanted it until they had it, and then they couldn't get enough of it.
That's man, I would love to dig into that idea. Like that to me is there's some sincere mystery there.
I mean, it is a thing. It's like I don't think you can ever predict.
Yeah, totally.
If there was a formula that you could predict that people would always find it.
Yeah.
But there is no. I mean, it's the idea is like how did Disney get the Marvel movies to hit when DC couldn't get their movies to hit? You know, there's not.
Wow.
Maybe
there's some reasons.
There are some reasons, but
why isn't Star Wars hitting? Why did this?
Yeah,
there are reasons.
There's reasons, but
I get what you're saying. There is something underneath.
Yeah, and it's like
timing. There's lightning in a bottle.
Oh yeah, there's always that lightning. Again, 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
The Hunger Games.
Right.
These things that we look back on now and we're kind of like, the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah. Totally.
We look back on a lot of these things with kind of like, it's the music. Why did I ever listen to Ace of Base?
Right.
You know?
Dude.
But you know, at the time, we loved Ace of Base.
Yeah. It was catchy.
Yeah. It hit at that just right moment that people didn't know they wanted it, and then they wanted it, and then they were done with it, and they'll never go back to it. But for that bright shining moment, people loved it.
Yeah.
And if we could, if there was a formula to find that, then everything would be that.
Yeah.
So my always thing is, as a creative, what we want to do is we want to find something that we believe strongly in personally. That we're not chasing a trend to try and make a buck, but we're trying to make something that we believe that we like. This is a game that I want to play.
It has some permanence in your ethos in some way.
It resonates with me as a creator, and if it does, chances are it's going to resonate with an audience. You'll find an audience that will resonate with if you go into work and you fire up your game and you want to play it because it's fun.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have a player base because if you want to play it, other people want to. But it's that thing where if you're working on a game and you come in and you're like, it's just I don't think it's that fun. No one's gonna play it.
Right.
I mean that's and it's a thing I think we kind of lose track of sometimes when we're in the weeds is this idea of, is this game fun?
Yeah.
You know, because we're trying to make all these systems work. We're trying to juggle all these balls at once, and it's like, we'll get back to this core gameplay loop later. Then later never comes. And it's just like, we finally got that loot system working, but
the player filter is so simple. Like you're saying, making the product is so complex, but the player filter is so simple. Is this fun?
Yeah.
It's the sum of all of that in a very simple delivery that either is a yes or a no.
Yeah.
And it is very hard to even to ensure you're stepping back amidst all the tasks and the needs to accomplish to continue to ask that very simple filter question.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, going back to what you asked, I think probably however many minutes ago, this idea, what would I suggest you do first? And it is story.
Yeah.
Because if you get the story, everything else is now working to tell the story. Everything is subjective to the story.
It should all point to that end.
Everything is just there to support it. Everything is, the art, everything I do is in the service of the story. Every system we make is in service to the story. I mean, it's kind of interesting. So have you played Jedi Fallen Order?
I haven't, but I have friends who've worked on it, and I did demo it at GDC. I forget which show it was. They were showing internally. So I've played it, but I haven't played the whole thing.
Yeah. So I haven't finished it yet either. But this idea is like the first mission that you're playing through, really cool.
Yeah.
That bit where the whole station's falling down and you're sliding down.
Totally.
It's like so cool. And I think, when they did that, like, this sliding technique is so fun. And then they tried to put it everywhere. Yeah. And it gets to, no, I'm serious. And then it gets to a point where it gets frustrating. And I think that's one of those things where they lost track of this idea of, we created this awesome system. We spent a lot of time doing it, a lot of time and money, and then they tried to find ways to put it everywhere because they had to justify the cost of it. And I think to the detriment of the game. The idea is like,
and that is that need for humility in terms of, you got to constantly have that sort of humble filter on you, where it's like, I know we poured a lot into this, but to that simple filter of fun or no, like we are overstaying our welcome.
Yeah,
you know?
No, it's a term we used in the military all the time. It's called polishing a turd.
Yeah. Okay.
Where it's like, if it doesn't matter how much time or money you spent on something, it's at the end of the day, if it's not good, you have to kill that baby. You have to say, like, you know what, it's just not working. And if we try to shoehorn it in, it's going to be to the detriment of other things. It's like, we have to be able to say, like, you know, this was a loss. We're going to chalk it up as a loss.
Yeah. Man, that's so important to maintain a framework of sort of impartiality while also being very partial to your work.
Oh yeah. Well, no, it's that thing.
It's like holding it loosely.
You have to be able to be passionate about what you're doing, but be able to distance yourself from it once it's done.
Yeah.
The idea of, like, so as a concept artist, like, everything I make, I'm going to find a way to be passionate. Like, I trust the choices I'm making are the right choices. Otherwise, I'm not doing them. I'm not making these choices. And it goes back to what I say between a Frankenstein design and a holistic design. It's like, as I'm designing something, it's like, this is the reason why I'm putting this, and this in it. All these things work toward what I'm trying to say here. And if, you know, and I say, I feel passionate about the thing, and I put it up and everybody goes, meh, then it's like, okay, I failed. What I was thinking was not good enough to communicate what I wanted to do for these guys. And I can't just sit there and say, well, let me tweak this and let me tweak that. And then I'll show it again and it goes, meh. Because all I'm doing is I'm just polishing something that doesn't work.
You need to reset.
You need to step back. You need to refactor. And it's like, okay, let's go back. And that's where I say is like, you know, if a character doesn't work, okay, let's go back to the core of who this person is. Whenever I talk to when I get a design prompt for a character, I always go back and say, okay, tell me about this person. What do they want? What are their goals? You know, I don't need to know, like, oh, they like basketball or something. No, just tell me what they want.
Their simple motivation.
Their character motivation, because that's what's going to drive the story is the motivation of the character.
You sound like an acting teacher right now. I love it.
Well, but that's the thing is these are kind of universal rules.
Universal truths.
There's a universal truth when it comes to story. And it's the problem you find a lot of times is when people think that story is subjective. And it really isn't.
No.
I
mean, dude, we could get into this. I mean, I think there's an element of need on our parts as beings to sort of tap into this sense of truth about who we are. And I think the best stories are the ones that are vessels that allow that truth to sort of speak through. Right?
Totally.
And I think finding fitness in your vessel is really the test of, is this interesting?
And again, that you always have to find that thing that says, this is why I'm telling this story. You know, why is this character in here? You know, why does this character look like this? Why does the world they inhabit look like this? Why? All the answers, all the questions that you should be asking all the time. You know, as a when I've written before, you know, I'll have a whiteboard and all I'll do is I'll write questions for myself that I have to answer. It's like, why are the characters doing this? You know, if you're right, you know, it's this idea is like, oh, there's this big thing that happens. Why don't they just leave? You know, it's the old horror movie cliche. It's like,
why don't you
just leave the house? you know, when I was working on Starblood Arena 2, you know, the idea of the world was there's these characters that are all kind of these misfits. They're out doing this, you know, battle royale thing to make money, and then we want to try and create a narrative into that. So it's like, okay, what can happen to these characters that will make them want to not just, you know, these are mercenaries. These guys are just going for money. What can I do to them to make them want to care about something other than money? Because money is the worst motivator of any character.
Totally.
Whenever I ask somebody, well, what does this character want? Money. It's like, no, they don't.
They
don't want money. They want something that money can get them.
Yeah, they want approval. They want.
There's money is money is not an end goal. It's a, even people who are super rich and the idea that their goal is to make more money than their neighbor, but their goal isn't to make more money. Their goal is to show up their neighbor.
That's interesting.
Because money is just a thing that gets you something.
Man, the human condition is so critical in what you're talking about.
It is so huge.
It's interesting how even someone who might judge the qualities needed in being a great concept artist is just like, oh, great line work and great shading and great coloring. Oh, I'll get it. And it's like, no. The human condition, my friend, is actually this thing that almost is, sure, all of those things. Of course. Yeah. You got to be.
Oh, you have to have the technical abilities to do it, obviously. Yeah. There's no substitute for being able to know anatomy and lighting and color. You can't get around these things.
But those are almost like, don't show up to the party.
Yeah, it's like, you can't show up to the party unless you know this. It's that's to get you in the door.
Yeah.
If you want to continue on with it, then you have to start understanding the whys. And the whys are the hardest questions to answer. It's just, because a lot of times people don't even think of the whys when they're asking for something.
Yeah.
And it's your job as a concept artist to say, like, they might not know what they want. I have to tell them what they want. And I have to be right.
Yeah.
Because they don't know. So many times you'll someone say, what do you want? I don't know. And the truth is they don't.
Right.
So I have to show them something that they don't even know that they want. And that's a hard thing to do.
Totally.
But it's that thing is, deep down inside, there is something they want. And if you ask the right probative questions, you can get close to that.
Yeah. That's super cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about it forever. This is really great. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah.
I am curious to get your take, especially as someone who kind of got into games later. People ask this question a lot. Like, if there's someone who's watching this who's just like wants to get into games, wants to do concept artwork, like as someone who's you've been through some roles and you're in a really great studio and you're making games, like, how would you counsel them? What would you say? How does someone, like, let's say my daughter, she's an artist, she loves to spend time drawing. How would you counsel her towards a career in games? Like,
as far as like concept art, a lot of it is, again, first you have to get the skills.
Yeah.
The funny thing is especially in video games, college isn't a prerequisite, really.
Yeah.
Going to school isn't really necessary. Like, I've got a master's degree. That doesn't get me a job.
Right.
What gets me a job is stuff I learned getting my master's degree.
Right.
So if you've got the skills already, like if you're one of these wunderkinds like what Joe Mad was, where he was, this incredible artist in high school.
Right. Or you watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah. But
you got the skills down.
If you are one of these, transcendent talents, like it's like you look at some of these people like, this is my art and I'm only 18. It's like
dude, it reminds me of Mr. Jack of Luke Mancini.
Yeah.
He was a fan artist for StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
And he was just drawing incredible Hydralisks and Zerglings and Ultralisks and like all this incredible fan art, to the point where Blizzard's like,
well, you want to just work with us?
Hey, you're really good at that.
Yeah.
Come on over.
Yeah.
Let's do StarCraft, right? Like,
but yeah, so again, you have to have the technical skills.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be the first hurdle if you want to do concept art. And then the second is being able to understand what you're required to do as a concept artist, and it isn't just make pretty pictures. There's very rare that you will do a finished illustration as a concept artist. It's the funny thing is, you go on something like ArtStation, and most of what you see on like the front page is finished illustration.
Right.
And you will so rarely ever do any of those pieces
as a
concept artist. Concept art is mostly, a turnaround, a call out,
right?
So a loose sketch there's just enough there that you can hand it off to an environment artist.
So true, man.
I
actually have pictures of working with Peter Lee on Heroes, especially when we're working on the comics and sort of concepts. So I'm like, I need something to show to this, illustrator who's working remotely or whatever. I have stuff on Post-it notes, like I just have from him that you're exactly right. Yeah. Sometimes it's just enough to give a cue.
It's just enough. And again, it's, as a concept artist too, you have to kind of understand, like, I can spend another 2 days polishing this.
Yeah.
Or it's good enough that I can hand it to this particular artist, or maybe this artist who I'm handing it off to, I need to give them more. And it's something that you learn as you go through the industry. It's like, you'll have these guys who are just like rock star character artists, where it's like you can give them a sketch on a napkin and it'll turn into something amazing.
Yeah.
Or some guy who's just out of school, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to kind of hold your hand a little bit more for this, just because you don't have the knowledge base that this person has to draw from. So it's like, I can go to like Jesse Sandifer, who I worked with at White Moon, and I can give him just a front sketch of a character, and he can fill in the back on his own, because he just knows. He just knows how to do this. Yeah. But it's like, okay, for this artist, I'm gonna have to do a turnaround, and I'm gonna have to do a turnaround of the head. I'm gonna have to do a call out of his gloves. I'm gonna have to do a call out of this pistol. I'm gonna have to give an orthographic of all these things, just because they may have the skills, but they might not have the confidence to take something and love and take it to the next point.
Sure. So know your team.
Yeah.
In that sense.
It's what I talk to people about. So from a comic book background, the writer will write something and they'll hand it off to an artist.
Yeah.
The penciler will take what's there and put more into it. And then the penciler will hand that off to an inker, and the inker will take those pencils and add more to it and give it to a colorist, and they'll add more to it.
Totally.
So each step, the product should get better. If it only looks good at one point and then it just stays the same all the way through, it's like, no, it should. We should always be looking to level up each time we put it through the pipeline.
Totally.
We get into trouble if something looks worse than when it started. But
exactly.
The best people to work with are the ones who can take something and say, okay, this is really good, and I'm not just going to follow it line for line, part for part. I'm going to find the deficiencies in this, and I'm going to correct them. And I'm going to, and as an artist, I trust the character artist to do that.
Yeah.
And I can say, it's like, I guess I wasn't clear there. That's supposed to be this for this reason. But if they take what I've done and say, yeah, I made this because it looks better, and you'll go, you know what, you're right. It looks 100 times better than what I drew, because I didn't really. I kind of scribbled that bit there.
Yeah.
And you filled in the blanks and made it awesome.
Dude, that's so awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your skill, your talent, everything you bring to the industry. If people want to follow you, or even say they have questions for you, is there a good way people can contact you?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always ArtStation is probably where I put most of my stuff. I have a blog, but it's like I haven't updated it in such a long time. And then
I'll put a link to that ArtStation. So if you're watching, it'll be in the comments below.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. If you want to be a concept artist and you want to show off your work, just get an ArtStation.
There you go.
Just get an ArtStation. We're not hiring you to be a web designer.
Right. Just put it on ArtStation.
I want to see your work, and I want to be able to see it easily, quickly, and clearly.
Right. That's fair. Yeah, it's good advice.
Don't
overdo it. Right. Know when you need to.
But that's another thing you talk about. Like getting to people is as they're starting out. It's like, if you want to be a concept artist, show me concept art.
Right.
I don't want to see still lifes.
Right.
I don't want to see anatomy studies. I'm going to be able to know if you know anatomy if I see a character you designed. Right. I'm going to know you know form and shadow if you can do a good environment. I don't need to see your still lifes to know that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good feedback, man. Well, I'm looking forward to Wasteland. I can't wait to play it. Of course, go out, grab Wasteland, pre-order if you're into that kind of thing. Dude, thank you. Thank you for being here so much. I really appreciate it. It's nice to know you.
Yeah,
hopefully we can be in contact,
man.
and if I can help anything that you need or you want to accomplish, please hit me up.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it, man.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one, whenever that'll be.